What's going on, guys? It's Michael here and welcome back to another FudgeMuppet Skyrim build. This is the Sabre Cat, and we're not talking about those pesky four-legged enemies from the main game. This Sabre Cat puts those to shame. The Sabre Cat is a Khajiit of Elsewhere trained to be a martial arts master. He doesn't mess around with fancy mortal-made blades, axes, and hammers. The Sabre Cat needs nothing but his razor-sharp claws and honed fangs to cut through his enemies like a hot knife through butter. And some gauntlets too. Inspired by an overwhelming urge to fight and a questionable moral compass, the Sabre Cat is the perfect candidate to embrace the plethora of powers the land of Skyrim has to offer. This vampire lord, dragonborn, Dark Brotherhood assassin has almost every form of crazy legendary power that Skyrim can give at his disposal, and he uses them for no one's benefit but his own. His approach to combat, hacking and slashing at everything in his sight until his former adversaries are neatly chopped chunks of meat marinating on the ground. When he isn't removing limbs from bodies with blade-like claws, he's sinking his feline fangs into the neck of his victims, consuming their blood and leaving them for dead. The Sabre Cat certainly isn't the friendliest build we've made. Now before we get started, don't forget we've put timestamps in the description for you, which will link you to each segment of the video. But with that out of the way, let's get straight into this build, starting off with the Sabre Cat's race, standing stone, and stats. If you haven't reached this conclusion on your own by now, let me just clarify. The Sabre Cat is a member of the Khajiit race, hailing from the land of Elsewhere. As a Khajiit, he has an ability called Night Eye, which allows him to see in the dark for 60 seconds as many times as he likes per day. The other special ability, which is an essential aspect of this build, is the Claws ability. With this, his unarmed attacks animation is different to all the other races, barring Argonians, as he will swipe with claws rather than closing his fist and punching like another race. This means that unarmed attacks do 15 points of base damage, which is significantly more viable than man and mer equivalents. This is heaps of damage at the start of the game. The Sabre Cat's early game standing stone will be the Lover Stone, as this optimizes leveling in each of the skill areas. Once leveling's out of the way, you'll want to switch it up to a standing stone we don't often recommend, but in this scenario we'll hope you'll hear us out. That standing stone is the Atronach Stone. This stone offers 50% spell absorption and 50 bonus points of magicka at the cost of 50% magicka regen speed. Usually we don't suggest this stone with characters who rely on conjuration magic, as the spell absorption works against your own spells, but in this case the Sabre Cat won't actually be conjuring anything even though he uses conjuration. He'll just be reanimating corpses. As for stats, the Sabre Cat's stat spread is 70% health, 30% magicka, and a big fat 0 to stamina. 70% health is really helpful for keeping you alive, of course, and it's especially useful as the Sabre Cat plays ultra aggressive, with no options for backing away from the thick of the action. 30% magicka will ensure that you can keep reanimating corpses as they drop, and that you can continue to heal them as well as yourself in the middle of a fight. The reason we're not bothering to invest in stamina is that you'll have plenty of stamina regen as a result of your enchantments and restoration perks, which regenerate stamina with health if you need it. The Sabre Cat was born deep in the forests of Elsewhere, in a small secluded village near the city of Corinth. In such a small village, everyone knew everyone, and the local community left most civil matters of governance and law enforcement to the order of monks on the outskirts of the town. With such a small populace, crime was scarce, and all of the Khajiit settlers got on well. The order of monks preached empathy and encouraged goodwill in the citizens, and for the most part, they all listened. The Sabre Cat, however, was a little different. He was a troublesome child and enjoyed mischief. Maybe his feline instincts were slightly overdeveloped, but the Sabre Cat hated wasting his magnificent claws on idle scratching. He preferred to sneak off into the forest and get into scuffles with the wildlife, putting his animalistic traits to the test. His parents worried that the Sabre Cat would not mesh with the tranquil nature of the village's other inhabitants, so they took him to the monks and begged that they take him into their ranks, showing him a pure path to maturity. Despite their efforts to channel his aggression and impulsiveness into martial arts, the Sabre Cat would often have difficulty sticking to strict routines and only really seemed mentally invested when it came to sparring. Nevertheless, his talent for combat was undeniable. The monks persisted, attempting to keep him on the righteous track until they eventually entrusted him with dealing with some petty civil disputes in the village. Two Khajiit were having a dispute over land which had turned physical, and the Sabre Cat was sent to mediate the situation and de-escalate it. Instead of doing that, the Sabre Cat dealt with the situation by threatening the two Khajiit with his razor-sharp claws. The Order of monks saw this act as bringing shame to their order. They were supposed to be the fair and just enforcers of peace and harmony between the villages, and the Sabre Cat was acting no better than a common thug. The monks retaliated by expelling him from their order, and this slammed the Sabre Cat's growing ego. How dare they kick out their most capable fighter? He considered confronting the head monk and challenging him to a duel, but he later decided not to give them the satisfaction of seeing him displeased. Instead, he acted glad to be gone, packed his things and ventured out into the forest. At long last, no one would preach at him for keeping his claws sharpened. Now he could do as he pleased, and no one in Elsewhere had the strength to stop him. The Sabre Cat spent the next few months hunting and fending for himself in the woodlands until he found himself in the city of Remen. This was the largest group of people the Sabre Cat had ever seen in one place, and he instinctively found himself wandering to the local tavern in hopes of finding a cocky drunk who might fancy a brawl. He ended up getting something completely different. The Sabre Cat stalked into the establishment, ducking under the low ceiling as he descended the stairs. By the bar, a loudmouth merchant was speaking of his recent voyage to Skyrim in the north. He put on quite a show, pulling a face and spreading his furry arms in a poor attempt to illustrate the size and strength of the Nord warriors. He wagered that a simple Windhelm dockhand could outmuscle Elsewhere's strongest fighters. This was met with condescending grunts and laughs from the patrons. The Sabre Cat barely hung around to finish his drinks before he was out the door and setting his sights north. These northerners only thought they were so strong because they hadn't met him yet. The Sabre Cat made great time hiking through Cyrodiil, driven by his burning desire to sink his claws into some Nords. He hit a noteworthy speed bump crossing the border, however, and he was caught by Imperial soldiers and taken to Helgen. After escaping Helgen, the Sabre Cat wasn't particularly frightened. In fact, he felt reassured. That shit-spouting sailor hadn't been lying. The Sabre Cat hadn't been in the province for half a day before he got an eye and an ear full of a dragon. The threat on his life only pumped his veins full of adrenaline, and the Sabre Cat loved every second of it. Now he will be searching for that feeling everywhere he goes. He'll wander around Skyrim, picking unarmed battles in taverns with arrogant Nords, but he will eventually grow bored of such mundane affairs. He starts to catch wind of vampire attacks, and that causes his ears to prick up. Vampires, hey? That seemed like a challenge more befitting for someone of his caliber. He decides to enlist in the Dawn Guard in order to get himself closer to the action. Although he never really intends to listen too closely to what they want from him, he's in it for the fighting and the thrill of baring his claws against their fangs. But then he receives Lord Harkon's tantalizing offer of undeniable power, and that only feeds into his hunger for power and his already swollen ego. As you'd expect, he takes up this offer, becoming a vampire himself and growing his power exponentially. Then the discovery that he is Dragonborn only feeds his ego further, and he will fancy himself the most powerful warrior who ever lived. Evidently, the factions for this build will include the Dawn Guard temporarily until joining the Volkihar vampires is an option. Then he will obviously get involved with the main storyline of the game, and from that, the Dragonborn DLC. He'll join the Dark Brotherhood as he has already embraced malevolence by joining the vampires, and he will briefly utilize the services of the College of Winterhold in order to expand his knowledge of restoration and conjuration magic. With the Sabre Cat's backstory, role-playing, and factions out of the way, this is how you'll want to play the build. These are the Sabre Cat's skills, spells, perks, and his overall playstyle. The primary skills are heavy armor, conjuration, restoration, smithing, and enchanting. The only conjuration spells you'll be using though will match your dark and brooding aesthetic. These will be necromancy spells, including all of the reanimation spells, with Dead Thrall being the best endgame choice to dedicate to. Dread Zombie will be incredibly useful as well for a fair chunk of the playthrough, but your primary damage output will actually come from your claws as you tear folks to shreds. The choice of restoration spells goes hand in hand with necromancy conjuration spells. Necromantic healing is a great option for keeping undead companions alive, and you can never go wrong with an investment in self-healing. If you're feeling adventurous with your magicka, you can even look into Sunfire spells to use against other undead. But with the spells mentioned, let's hop into the Sabre Cat's essential perks. Firstly, you'll notice there's no mention of one-handed or two-handed, and that's because, as the backstory heavily suggests, the Sabre Cat relies on his paws when he isn't casting spells, so all melee combat will be unarmed. The first skill to look into is heavy armor. Not only is this great for defense and keeping you alive, but there's the perk that will increase your damage output in there with unarmed, so we can't stress how useful this skill tree is early on and throughout the game. From the heavy armor skill tree, you'll want to take the left branch up to and including conditioning. The most most notable perk of the bunch is definitely Fists of Steel. This will make our Khajiit's already quite deadly unarmed claw attacks do the armor rating of the equipped gauntlets in extra damage. However, it is just the base damage, but we've got you covered to increase your damage even more from here. But let's talk about Conjuration first. As I mentioned when talking about spells, this school of magic will offer you some undead support while swiping away at enemies, and it fits the whole vampire theme as well. From this skill tree, we suggest taking the third branch all the way up to Twin Souls, and then the right hand branch up to Master Conjuration. That's for Dead Thrall, of course, which is ridiculously powerful, and Twin Souls is obviously worth mentioning as you can have 2 summoned companions at once, or in this case, reanimated Dead Thralls. Like I said, you're not using any Atronachs, so perks like Necromancy and Dark Souls will also be hugely beneficial for added undead longevity. The Sabre Cat may be extremely confident in his abilities, but he's no fool. He still sees the value in keeping himself healthy and protected, especially if he's going to be charging in head on and getting very up close and personal. Therefore, he's seen the value in learning spells from the Restoration skill tree. You should take everything in this skill tree excluding Ward Absorb, Master Restoration, and Jewel Casting. Necromage is very handy if you plan to be using necromantic healing often, and also obviously as a vampire it makes you super powerful. It adds bonuses to all the effects on your characters and all your abilities and just makes you really powerful. You'll have really high unarmed damage too. Now thanks to Dark Souls from the Conjuration skill tree, your undead companions will have a significant amount of health. And then like I said, with Necromage making spells used on undead more effective and you healing your own undead at times, you can't go wrong. Now looking back on the importance of heavy armor, it goes without saying that he'll be very conscious about only wearing the very best. So smithing is the logical next step. From this skill tree, we recommend going for Arcane Blacksmith and then the right branch up to Daedric Smithing. This will allow you to smith up everything in your arsenal even after they've been enchanted. On that note, enchanting is actually our final skill. It's no secret that unarmed combat isn't the norm in Skyrim, so having the ability to enchant gauntlets and rings with Fortify unarmed damage is a massive help to the build. From the enchanting skill tree, take the middle branch up to and including extra effect. Insightful Enchanter is important for getting the best out of skill-based enchantments like Fortify unarmed damage, and with extra effect you can just have 2 effects on 1 item. Always a great pick. So with those skill spells and essential perks, this is how you'll use them in practice if you couldn't already tell by watching the video. Your playstyle involves reanimating the strongest corpses you create in battle, or coming into the fight with pre-prepared Dead Thralls. He'll come running in with his claws exposed before slicing skin from bone, gnashing his foes where they stand. If he needs to, he can quickly equip restoration spells to restore his health and stamina, or to heal his reanimated followers. As for gear, the Sabre Cat will wear full Daedric armor without the helmet. You can wear the helmet if you want for the bonus armor rating, but we just thought it looked so much cooler without it. Along with this, be sure to slap on a necklace and a ring of your choice for those bonus enchantment slots. When smithing up all the gear, be sure to drink a blacksmith's potion beforehand for the best results. Now in terms of enchantments, chuck a Fortify unarmed damage enchantment on the gauntlets and the ring, but be sure to do that after getting the Necromage perk and using an enchanter's elixir. This will give you the best results. For the other pieces of armor and jewelry, Fortify health and stamina or Fortify restoration and conjuration will all work wonders for this build. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel and give the video a like if you enjoyed the Sabre Cat. Don't forget to head down to the description where you can find timestamps to help you navigate throughout the video, as well as links to Scott's, Drew's, and my social media account. There you can keep up to date on everything we're working on and interact with us too. Lastly, head on down to the comments to cast your vote for which build we remaster next. Your choices this week are the Acolyte and the Dremora Warlord. Every vote counts, so get to it. Thank you as always for watching, guys. I've been Michael, and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.